George, you're going to do yours with Adam Smith. Right, okay.
I don't know nothing about Adam Smith, so I'm quite intrigued now.
Me as well, Jamie. So yes, this is kind of part 2 of the trilogy of the 11th of October, and handing over to George to kind of lead us into this. I suspect we all have the same beers as we had in the previous episode. Is that correct? Or Jamie, have you moved on to another one of your 4?
Yeah, I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm
still on
hazy
gin.
I'm still on hazy gin.
I'm still on the same one. So no need to reintroduce the beers, I suppose, because people can go back to the previous episode and have a listen to that if they haven't already, and figure out what beers we're drinking in episode 2 of the.
It's a good excuse for somebody, isn't it? Thinking, hang on, I really want to watch that again, but it feels a bit like, it's like having 2 Christmases, one after the other, one on Boxing Day, and think, oh no, I've got a reason to now.
This is just like Christmas, just like Christmas, absolutely. God. Anyways, George.
For the doing, for us, it's hard work for us.
Do you know what it is, man? Whenever I try and get George into the conversation, I just hear him chirruping away in the background. You know what I mean?
It'll be about 5 minutes of this, even when we do start. Trying to make me laugh or something.
Jamie has been labelled the instant gratification monkey. That's a whole other story. That's a whole other story, maybe for a future episode when we could look at how our brain works. But Jamie is the instant gratification monkey who just keeps popping up to kind of redirect you to something that you shouldn't be talking about at moments when you should be concentrating on something like Adam Smith, for example.
Oh, right.
George.
What a link.
Right. I've chosen to speak about Adam Smith in the role of the state. Reason why is because of the relentless creep of privatisation in social care. It's a live issue at the moment. Carving up children's care homes, possibly even large swathes of the sector going to be pulled out of hands of local authorities into more private individuals. And what this brave new world is going to look like for us as social workers. Even things that like the NHS, how many agency workers are in the NHS, how many private hospitals do we have? These things. This seems to be a real common moment for social care. So Adam Smith, 18th century Scottish thinker, economist. The bit I'm going to look at is from The Wealth of Nations, where he lays out his whole specialisation, the role of capitalism, and what he identifies as 3 areas, and only 3 areas, the state should get involved in, or he calls it the sovereigns. I guess that when there's a king, maybe. But so to protect national borders, like going to war when they kick off with you, protect the people from violence on the streets, so civil law, and public works. So whilst he largely means roads and things like that, and ports and other important stuff, building things, he also means education. So what do you do with what basic role does the state have the most vulnerable of society? Now, I wonder whether in the modern sense that would also include social care, looked after children, care homes, and these things. But he has a very clear caveat on what would count as public works, because he describes as it would have to be for the whole of society. So that's how he differentiates the road. So the whole of society can use a road. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Rather than, I suppose, a care home for people with dementia or a certain population of children that end up in a children's home. And I think we can have the debate whether that is exclusive or anyone could get dementia or anyone could end in a children's home. I don't know whether I'm bending the definition. But the important thing here is Smith believes the best way to allocate resources is the market. So when there's market forces, you've got price, demand, supply, they'll set the right level of service, price, everything, because of competition, and the forces will balance out. So the example is, say Jamie is an apple farmer, and so is Stephen. Jamie has loads of apples and he charges £10 an apple. Stephen charges £7. I charge £6. People are going to cut me first, exhaust my supplies, and go around, but they'll probably end up with some sort of average price. You see what I mean? Because what he would describe is the market will force it. Are these things going to be present in social care, especially when we don't have choice? People don't have a choice. Well, do they have a choice what care home they're going to when there might only be one locally, or if your child's going to be removed, who chooses what private care provider? So if you exclude choice from capitalism, is it really anything different than the state just providing it in an expensive way?
Well, I don't know enough about this to form an opinion, George.
That's the smartest thing you've said all night, Jamie.
I think choice is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? And I think I'm sure I read a book at some point years ago called "The Illusion of Choice," and that's that capitalism, which is what you're talking about here, isn't it? Market competition, I suppose, in a sense. Capitalism creates the illusion of choice, but actually, when it comes to things like social care, people would prefer less choice, higher quality, rather than more choice, lower quality. And I think that the whole purchase provider split from back in Margaret Thatcher's days, when that happened in the 80s. Yeah, it led us down a route of increased competition, and what that meant was it drove down price. I mean, an hour of local authority home support was always costing more than an hour of a private company's home support. And what that meant was, in effect, was because the rights of the workers in the local authority compared to the private industry were very different. So that's how they drove costs down, but cost was driven down at the cost of quality of care. And I think it ends up, when competition and the market are allowed to dictate such things, it ends up being a race to the bottom, doesn't it? I mean, I think that cuts across everything from yogurts and televisions to social care. I think we're involved now in a race to the bottom. We demand things to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and the quality of them gets less and less and less. And I think that's a social problem across the world. So I think across our society anyway. So I think it becomes a race to the bottom when the market and competition get involved, when what we should be doing is saying, actually, it should be a race to the top in terms of quality, and we need to pay whatever it takes to provide that quality of care.
Yeah, I started back in the late 80s in care homes, so in working for private sector and local authority. And to me, like, youth training scheme in a private care home, and I'm working in a local authority care home. And I would say the standards at the time were probably slightly better in the local authority care homes than they were in the private sector. It wasn't vast. What I've witnessed in them 30 odd years is, and it's just an erosion of standard, an erosion of quality. What we accept now as the standard, the normal standard, wouldn't have been acceptable 25 years ago. I really now that's from experience, not from any kind of research I've read or anything like that, just from my own experience. For somebody who's regularly going to care homes as I currently do. Yeah. And I think that's what the market forces have driven, and what we've seen is that people are making profits out of the sector, and that money is going into somebody's bank account, shareholders' bank accounts, and that's directly resulting from quality being taken out of these people's homes and given to the private sector and pockets of people. And not everyone's. I'm not judging everyone in the same way. There's some care homes which are far better than the others, and profit's not the main priority for a lot of people, but for a lot of companies it is. And because a company in itself needs to function, and it needs to create a profit, or it doesn't exist.
It's the role of a company to make a profit for its shareholders. That's the purpose of it. But for me, I think
that's always a message of success, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no problem with that per se. I have no problem with the fact that companies exist in a capitalist society, which is what we're in, and it ain't going to change anytime soon, and it's probably never going to change. It is what we've got, and we have to try and work with that. I've got no problem with people making money. I just think there are some things that people should not make money out of. And I think this is one of them for me. I think there are other things that should be state controlled as well. And I think care's one of them. We shouldn't be making money out of people because they got dementia, or because they were born with a disability or a learning disability, or because their parents couldn't look after them. I don't know. Is this where you anticipated we go, George? What were you thinking?
Oh no, this is it. What I'm aghast at is I think you follow some of the same people on Twitter as me. Some of the stories about when Ofsted had gone into these children's homes, private children's homes, was that prison where the baby died or something? Like the young mother had a baby and they died, and this American firm owns this prison in England. How can if the state does allow private ownership, why can't the regulatory bodies say, well, that's you finished then? If these things are happening, to continue to happen, the removal of like it's like Circle and these people, they're just disaster after disaster. And the state doesn't have recourse to say, no, that's it now. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And I guess even if you own one school or one children's home, seems to be no rule to stop you bidding for more contracts. When really, the very simple rules could sort of reduce it a little bit.
I think the problem is a problem of scale. What I've witnessed, over the years, generally work within in this sector, is that you found those successful smaller care homes were getting outpriced because the money local authorities were given per head to each care provider, especially in older person services. I can't speak for others. Didn't really increase as much as with inflation. It didn't certainly seem to in any way. And they were asking to do more and more with, I wouldn't say with less and less, but more and more with, when inflation was rising, the cost of living was rising. And those smaller care homes were closing down because the profit margin was getting smaller, and so the companies couldn't sustain the smaller care homes. But if you had a whole conglomerate of care homes, so if each care home made a tiny bit of profit, that was okay because the company itself made a big care home. So that personal touch was taken out. So I felt sorry for those smaller care homes who generally believed in what they were doing, believed in the ethos of it, but it would be a case of if you had a couple of vacancies, that would mean that you couldn't sustain your staffing levels, and then therefore the thing would collapse. But if you had a bigger company, you could afford some hits along the way, and then so that just kind of led away from that personal approach to the care, became more and more of a business because the bigger companies and focus was on profits, and so I think that's where it's.
Yeah, I do. I remember that as well from when I was a practitioner. That generally speaking, not in every case, but generally speaking, the care homes that were run by individuals, family owned, that kind of thing, generally, they might have been a bit more run down and a bit more scruffy looking around the edges as care homes, but generally the care was largely better for the most part in those care homes than it was in care homes that were part of huge groups, yet those were the ones who were always struggling from kind of month to month and at risk of closure. In fact, I remember being involved in the closure of a care home because their residents, it was down to about 12 residents by the time, and yes, the home was a bit raggy around the edges, and the rooms hadn't been done up for years, but the quality of care was decent. It was decent, and but they could never generate enough because of the rates. They could never generate enough money to kind of completely refurbish the place, which would have attracted more customers. If you want to use Thatcher's kind of language, they would have attracted more customers, and therefore the care home would have been viable. And it just became at the point where it just wasn't viable because they didn't have enough people, and those 12 people had to be moved to other care homes because because so they lost their home, and that to me is why you can't make profit out of these things, because you move someone into a care home and that is then their home, and all right, we all have to move homes from time to time. Our finances change, but these people have dementia or are very unwell with long-term conditions and that kind of thing, and we just need to do well by them, not move them because somewhere's not making enough money. It's just wrong, fundamentally wrong.
And if you're picking a home, you pick a home that's in a nice neighbourhood. You pick a home that's got nice wallpaper. That feels nice when you're inside it. But if the wallpaper's peeling back a bit, you're going to go, nah.
Yeah. Well,
it was put 20 years ago, and you wouldn't pick that. So if you're expecting people to make decisions who don't know the system like we know it, and they're going to go for the ones with the new refurbished wallpaper and the fancy chairs and the staff in all the fancy uniforms. You're going to go for that because that looks better, and you're going to make a judgment. And where do you judgments come from? Is what you see, the evidence, and what you seek.
Absolutely. I remember a care home opening, purpose built, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It was it was slick, it was gorgeous. And over time, obviously you get to talk to people who are moving in there, and time again, the family of the person moving in loved it because it looked great, ticked all the boxes. But the person living there it's not very good. It's a bit sterile. People aren't particularly caring, those kind of things. Yeah, go down the road to some care home, raggy around the edges. The families didn't like it because it didn't look nice. And I suppose that's something about kind of how we feel we're judged by other people, isn't it? But the people living there were like, it's great, man. Great, fabulous. We'll have been here. The care staff had been the same group of people for donkeys. You know what I mean? So I think I think profit should not be a driver of care provision, which I suppose is interesting and brings us on to the whole social care levy, tax, national insurance thing, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know what we think about that.
I don't think it's not difficult. I think it's an easy one, and I think it's basically robbing the poor to pay the rich, isn't it? It's because the people who don't have much in society, who have less and less choice and control over what happens to them in the care sector, don't pay for the care. They don't have to sell the homes or the house homes once they pass away. They don't have no wealth to pass on to the next generation. So they're not paying anyway because the state pays for those. So it's a case of those people who we're going to be funding. I haven't read the details of the act. That's just what's been publicised. But it seems that it was those people were funding the care, or those people who've got wealth to pass on. So it's like the working classes are paying extra 20 quid. Is a lot of money for people who are living on minimum wage, and they're paying for the care of people who've got hundreds of thousands of pounds in the bank, and you're thinking, and you're selling that as a good thing. If that money was going to improving social care systems, I would say yes, I'll pay the extra £20. I think other people should as well. I think we should try and afford that. But it doesn't seem to be. It just seems to be saying, well, because you've got loads of money, you don't have to sell your house to move into this care home. You can keep the capital of your house and move into this care home, and the rest of the public's going to pay for it. I think that doesn't seem. It seems the opposite of Robin Hood to me.
Do you in principle though? Do you not think it would provide a better system than the one we've got? I take your point. about the fact that it seems to protect assets.
If the money goes into the system. I would definitely say, but it's not, the money by what I've read, I haven't seen the detail, I haven't seen published or not. The money certainly seems to be going to people who've got assets rather than. So you're taking money from the vast majority of people who don't have that many assets, and into the minority who do have that many assets.
So would you say that having some sort of system where money is generated by the state through some sort of mechanism, so it's a bit like the NHS, social care becomes a bit like the NHS, is laudable and positive, but the system still skews the benefits of such a system as it's offered to us, still skews the system towards the better off and the worse off pay. Well, as a percentage, we end up the worse off end up paying more as a percentage of their income, don't they?
Yeah. But it's basically, I mean, it's very, very generalised to me, but it seems that the poor in society are paying for the inheritance of the rich in society. That seems it goes back. I know, driven from point a little bit, but it's the same principle as working family tax credit. Because on appearance, that seems a really good socialist way forward. Is that if you don't earn enough money, we'll give you a bit extra, so you've got enough money to get by. But in reality, when you break it down, it's like, hang on, companies say like Asda. So you get one Asda superstore, make hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds in profit every year, but they can't afford to give the staff a decent wage. So the tax man, us, are paying extra money to bump up their wage bill. So it's not a good system. It's just getting more and more of the taxpayers to pay the massive corporates, and that's where we're going.
Smith would say that's an economic failure. The wage offered by Asda wouldn't be sufficient without tax credits to attract enough workers. The difficulty is the workers would probably turn up. They'd probably just take the hit because they don't. Again, it's this choice thing. In Smith's universe, we've got this unlimited. Well, I'll just go and pick apples, or I'll go and work down the docks, or whatever. There's infinite supply of different roles you can do, and you go to the wage versus your skill, and you pick the choice sort of thing. I think so many people are so restricted in the options, they end up doing what they've always done.
It's same as the furlough scheme. Everyone says that it was a brilliant system, but it wasn't. It was a case of the tax man. This is taking out of social care budgets and NHS budgets, is going on and paying the payroll for companies that are still turning over billions of pounds. Yeah. I think I get the furlough scheme for small companies or companies who are struggling financially as a hit, but we were still paying Virgin's money. They were still turning over billions of pounds. Wetherspoon's still turning over billions of pounds. Dyson, all these massive huge companies. Asda, sorry, I don't think Asda furloughed staff, but those people who could afford to take that hit weren't taking it. We were paying for multi-billion-pound profit organisations. We were paying their payroll as taxmen, and we weren't funding. And we didn't give the nurses who were on the COVID frontline, who were getting ill, who were dying. We didn't give them a cost of living pay rise as a direct result. But we furloughed and we paid the payroll of massive companies who were earning billions of pounds, and that billions of pounds went into somebody's pocket. But it was sold as a socialist ideal. I mean, even to reporters saying, why is Toys doing something that's a socialist ideal? And it certainly wasn't. It was lining the pockets of the mates. Sorry.
No, it's great. Jamie, whenever you talk passionately like this, I just want to go and storm the Bastille. I just want to kind of go through the barricades. I just want to kind of do that. And I can honestly, at some point in the future, I can see you on a T-shirt, a bit like Che Guevara. I can see you on a T-shirt, and we'll be talking about the Scorer Revolution, but yeah, absolutely.
I hope I don't get shot in Bolivia, to be fair, but other than that, what a great man.
Oh, dear me.
Just
George, sum things up. I think unless there's got any more views, I think it's a funny thing, a funny analysis, because I think a limited state intervention has got some attractive qualities. But I think particularly in our circumstances, when children are told by the state you must live not with your parents in a care home, right, or someone with mental health disorder has to live in either a prison because of the committing a crime. The state's told them, they're so vulnerable. The state said they have to stay there. It's a very peculiar set of things. If the state's raising taxes to pay private companies to keep people inside, and then there's profit in it. It's a very uncomfortable circumstance. I think, from a radical social point of view, if someone we've got a care plan on is going to be placed in a failing children's home or a failing care home, why should we sign off that plan? We wouldn't be advocating for a child to return home to a parent that's previously abused a child. Why do we use? Because then it's this corporate manslaughter sort of but on the hand, why do we? Like I said before, Circle just keep getting these whatever comes up, pandemic, this, or they need this, or there's no teachers. They're just the answer, aren't they? And they never done. Well, maybe they have done a good job, but they've done lots of bad jobs. It's endlessly Teflon, isn't it? Really, corporation. When what we do as social workers, we pin so heavily on the individual to pay the price, but the buck never seems to stop with the corporation. Like your furlough point, and, well, so I try to pay the people that we employ.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's another layer to that. There's something that popped up that I was thinking about the other day in that, and it's it's this term that I've only come across recently, but it's the moral injury. It's the moral injury of social workers having to place children or older people into those care homes, knowing that they're failing. And how does that feel? You know, we're talking here about a profession, racked with stress and burnout. And then we're adding into that this potential for moral injury of somebody finding themselves in a position where they think, I have to place this child, I have to place this older person, something has to happen, I have to place them into somewhere that only a month ago was, I don't know, special measures or whatever these kind of things are. I have to place them. That's the only place I've got. How does that feel?
Better two evils, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's one of them things that we often talk to students about. Is often social work is about balancing up a range of problematic, less than ideal options and picking the best one from a poor range. So I think it's absolutely bad for the child or the older person or whatever to be placed into those kind of things. But as a profession, we also labour under the injury of what that does to us, knowing that that's what we've had to do.
Good. So my final thought on that one, and I think it takes us back to and going back there, the previous discussion about Popeye, it's bringing that tension between the left and the right, and I think that tension comes from our need to be social creatures, because we are naturally social creatures, and as human beings, the community is very, very important. It's still very, very important to us. If you look at kind of anthropology studies and stuff, it's how we function in society. It's not because it's better for the community. The outcome, if it is often enough, but it's because it's better for the individuals to live in such a cohesive way with everybody else. But there's another element to being a human being, isn't it? Is that striving for something more, to striving for some power, or to striving for better circumstances for you and your family, which leads on to capitalism. So it's part of us. And I think we need to kind of recognize that we are human beings, and we have this tension within us at all times, isn't it? We have a tension to be a community collective, but we also have we'll have this drive for our own selves and our own families to strive better, which brings about greed. And I think your Adam Smith point kind of really highlights that point in the social, as we need kind of, I think, just recognize it. I think that's a hard thing to do, is just recognize, rather than being fighting against the system all the time, despite my earlier rants. I think we need to recognize that we are living in a system. We've got to work within it.
Just a little anecdote on greed. You could go to Adam Smith's grave at the bottom of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, just pop into the graveyard and say it. To go to Karl Marx grave in London is £10.
Wow. And does the money go to the state for Karl Marx?
Some company, I think, that runs the grave. I think it's
sure.
Wow. How bizarre is that? I mean,
he'd be turning his grave.
He literally will be. He'd be there, going round and round.
That's bizarre, that Joe. I didn't know that. Right, I just want to say, I'm a little bit disappointed, George. We didn't get some fascinating facts about Adam Smith and his links to South Tyneside or Radiators.
Oh, well, I'm not going to be able to do any of them about mine either, I don't suppose.
No.
I've got some facts. That's some of the rules. I mean, I've scoured the internet to find out philosophers who have links to South Tyneside and Radiators. That's the only reason I use Karl Popper.
Really? Oh, I thought we were just making that shit up.